No one respects you. They might smile at you, they might pretend to be polite, but deep down, they don't see you as a man of value. And the reason is simple. You don't keep your word. You complain too much. You let your emotions control you. And worst of all, you live to please others. Jake used to be that kind of guy. He made promises but never followed through. Constantly complained about life, lost his temper over small things, and was always afraid of losing people's approval. The result? His friends didn't trust him, his boss didn't value him, and women didn't even bother looking his way. But Jake changed. And in this video, I'll show you exactly how he earned back respect, and how you can do the same. If you're ready to face the truth, keep watching. If you feel the positive energy, don't forget to like this video and share a meaningful comment. No one respects a man who makes empty promises. Not your friends, not your coworkers, not your family, and definitely not any man who looks at you with admiration. You can wear the most expensive suit, drive a flashy sports car, but if your words are cheap, you're still just a weak man. And the worst part? Even you despise yourself. Jake, 34, was the type of guy who always talked about what he was going to do but never actually did it. He said he'd go to the gym every morning, but when the alarm went off, he just hit snooze. He said he'd save money, but every weekend he blew his paycheck on beer and nonsense. He promised to show up on time, but he was always at least 15 minutes late. Jake was the kind of person that friends eventually stopped asking for help, that bosses never trusted with important tasks, and that women saw as nothing but a failure. And the worst part? Jake started believing it himself. He told himself he was just bad at discipline, that he wasn't the type of guy who could stick to a plan. But the truth? Those were just excuses. One day, Jake promised his coworker he'd finish a report by Friday night. At 5 p.m., he sat in front of his computer but thought, whatever, I'll just do it tomorrow. He shut his laptop, went to the bar, and had a great time like nothing important was waiting for him. The next morning, he was still asleep, hungover, when his phone buzzed. It was his boss. "Where's the report?" Jake jumped out of bed, scrambling to come up with an excuse. But it didn't matter. His boss didn't care about his reason. The only thing that mattered was that Jake had proven himself unreliable. And when you're not reliable, you never get a real chance to move up. Respect is not something you demand. It's something you build through your actions. If you don't keep your word, people will quietly cross you off their list of trustworthy individuals. And here's the most dangerous part. They won't tell you. No one will come up to you and say, "I don't respect you anymore." They will simply withdraw, remove you from big opportunities, and stay away from you when things really matter. Want respect? Start with one simple rule. Only say what you actually intend to do. And if you say it, then no matter how hard it is, follow through. There are no valid excuses. If you promise to be on time, show up 5 minutes early. If you promise to finish your work, get it done before the deadline. If you say you'll change, start changing now. Every time you do this, you lay another solid brick in the foundation of your honor. And one day, you won't have to ask for respect. It will come to you naturally. Jake had lost the respect of his colleagues, his boss no longer trusted him, and his friends saw him as nothing more than a loudmouth. But instead of facing reality, Jake did what so many weak men do. He complained. He blamed his boss. "He's too harsh. Everyone misses deadlines sometimes." He blamed his job. "This company doesn't motivate me, so why should I even try?" He blamed life. "There's just too much going on for me to focus." Sound familiar? That's the voice of a loser. A real man never complains. He looks at the problem, takes responsibility, and fixes it. But Jake didn't. Instead, he spent hours whining to his coworkers about how unfair his boss was, venting to his friends about how hard life was, and reading endless articles on how to build self-discipline without ever applying a single lesson. Jake wanted respect, but he did nothing to earn it. One night, while sitting at a bar with Matt, an old friend he hadn't seen in years, Jake started his usual rant. "Everything sucks. My boss is an asshole, my job is boring, and no matter how hard I try, no one appreciates me." Matt silently took a sip of his beer, then looked Jake dead in the eye and said, "Shut the hell up." Jake froze. Matt continued, "Listen to me, Jake. No one cares about your problems. No one feels sorry for you because life didn't go your way. You have two choices: keep complaining and stay average forever, or get up, take action, and go after what you want." Jake wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew Matt was right. For the first time, he faced a harsh truth. The world owes him nothing. No one was responsible for fixing his mistakes. If he wanted a better job, he had to prove he deserved it. If he wanted respect, he had to become someone worthy of it. That night, Jake went home, sat at his desk, and wrote down every single thing he usually complained about. Then he asked himself, "What can I do right now to change this?" And he started taking action. No waiting, no excuses. He woke up earlier, trained his body, worked twice as hard as anyone else, and never complained again. No one had to listen to Jake's whining anymore, because he was too busy doing. You can sit there and keep complaining about everything wrong in your life, or you can get up and do something about it. The choice is yours. Jake had stopped complaining. He no longer blamed his boss, his coworkers, or life itself. But one problem remained. He couldn't control his emotions. Whenever someone criticized him, Jake exploded in anger. If a coworker accidentally left his name out in a meeting, he felt disrespected. If another driver cut him off on the road, he immediately cursed and wanted to punch the guy in the face. Anything that didn't go his way could set him off. What Jake didn't realize was that these emotional outbursts were a sign of weakness. A man ruled by his emotions is a man who lacks self-control. And if he can't even control himself, how can he control anything else in life? A man who is easily provoked will never be respected. Real men don't react like wild animals. They think, assess the situation, and act with intention. One morning, as Jake was waiting in line for coffee, a guy behind him accidentally bumped into his back. Jake spun around, ready to snap, but the man simply shrugged and said, "Relax, man, it's just a bump." At that moment, Jake realized how ridiculous he looked, like a child throwing a tantrum. He started reflecting on all the times he had lost control. Why did he get so angry when a coworker forgot to mention his name? Why did he feel insulted when someone cut him off in traffic? The answer was simple. Jake took himself too seriously. Weak men think the world revolves around them. They see every word or action as a personal attack. But the truth? No one cares. No one sits around thinking about whether Jake felt disrespected. His coworker didn't intentionally exclude his name from the meeting. They just forgot. The driver who cut him off wasn't trying to insult him. He was just in a rush or being careless. Jake decided to change. Every time negative emotions rose up, he asked himself, "Does this really matter? Is this worth losing control over?" 90% of the time, the answer was no. A month later, his colleagues noticed the change. Jake no longer overreacted to jokes, no longer snapped over small things, no longer wasted energy on pointless arguments. When someone tried to provoke him, Jake just smiled and said, "I don't care." And something strange happened. People started respecting him more. When you control your emotions, others can't manipulate you. When you remain calm, people take notice. If you let emotions control you, you're a slave to the world. If you control your emotions, you own yourself. So which will you choose? Jake had learned to control his emotions. He was no longer the kind of man who got easily offended or angered by meaningless words. But there was one thing he had yet to realize. He was still living to please others. Since childhood, Jake had been taught to fit in, to be someone everyone likes, to do what's expected of him. That mindset made him constantly seek validation. When choosing a job, he didn't pick what he loved. He picked what his family and friends considered stable. When hanging out with his group, he forced himself to laugh and engage, even when he had no interest. When someone asked for a favor, no matter how tired or busy he was, he always said yes out of fear of disappointing them. Jake wasn't living for himself. He was living for the expectations of others. This became a real problem when he realized that no one truly respects a man with no backbone. His coworkers saw him as easy to manipulate. His friends saw him as someone with no personality. Even women weren't drawn to him, because a man who can't make his own decisions is not attractive. People might have liked Jake, but they didn't respect him. Then, one day, his boss asked him to stay late at work, without a real reason. In the past, Jake would have said yes without hesitation, but this time he calmly responded, "I've completed my tasks, I have personal plans, and I'll be leaving on time." His boss stared at him for a moment. Then he simply nodded. No anger, no punishment, just respect. For the first time, Jake set a boundary. After that, things started changing. When his friends invited him out for pointless drinking sessions, he declined, without making excuses. When someone asked for his opinion, he spoke his truth instead of saying what they wanted to hear. When dating, he stopped trying to be the man his date wanted. He was simply himself. And what happened? People started respecting him more. A man who isn't afraid to say no, a man who lives by his own principles, a man who doesn't fear losing approval. That is the kind of man people notice. On the other hand, a man who tries to please everyone gets ignored, disrespected, and overlooked when real opportunities arise. Jake once feared being judged, but now he understood a powerful truth. Respect doesn't come from being liked by everyone. It comes from having the courage to be yourself. People may not always like you, but if you stand firm in your values, they will respect you. And one day, you will respect yourself. Jake had stopped living to please others. He had learned to control his emotions and ignore meaningless distractions. But there was still one thing he hadn't realized. Changing from within isn't enough. You have to become truly valuable. The world does not respect the useless. Don't fool yourself into thinking that just being confident or true to yourself is enough. No one cares about you unless you have something to offer, whether that's skills, knowledge, strength, or influence powerful enough to make people take notice. Jake used to be lazy, mediocre, and good at nothing. He worked an average job, lived an average life, and no one saw him as important. Then he realized, respect doesn't come from words, it comes from the value you create. So what did he do? He stopped wasting time on useless distractions. Instead of spending hours scrolling through social media, he started developing real skills. Reading business books, learning martial arts, and becoming the best at his job. He hit the gym, built his physical strength, and improved his appearance. Most importantly, he stopped spending money on cheap thrills and started investing in his future. In just 6 months, his coworkers began asking for his advice. His friends actually listened when he spoke. Women started noticing him. Why? Because Jake was no longer just another nobody. He had something worth respecting. If you bring nothing to the table, don't expect respect. Don't demand recognition if you haven't earned it. This world doesn't operate on emotions, it operates on competence. You want respect? Become someone even you admire. Jake did it, and if he can change, so can you. But the real question is, do you have the guts to become truly valuable? No one respects you by default. You can't ask for it, you can't buy it, and you sure as hell can't whine your way into getting it. You have to earn it. Jake used to be insignificant. He made promises he never kept, complained about life, let his emotions control him, feared losing people's approval, and most importantly, had no real value. No one took him seriously. But then he changed. He kept his word, acted instead of complaining, mastered his emotions, lived by his own principles, and constantly improved himself. And the result? People respected him, not because they had to, but because he deserved it. Now it's your turn. You can continue living in mediocrity, or you can become the kind of man even you would admire. The choice is yours. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.